Oh, is it called the Morpe? I think it's the Morpe. Morpe, IKEA. Not Morphe. Must include Morphe. Mope. Mope. M-O-P-P-E. Mope? Mope? If I'm Swedish. Ma mope. Okay.
That was very Italian.
It's a mope. And yes, it is from Print My Pet.
But why is it yellow?
What? Hi everyone, my name is Kelsey.
And my name is Becky.
And we are the TheSorryGirls.
Welcome back to another exciting episode of DIYing your DMs.
This is where we DIY members' DMs and our Instagram DMs. Things that you guys want to see DIY because we get it. We all want to DIY sometimes. That's why we have this channel.
Before we get into what DIYs you DM'd us, we have a little bit of announcement we'd like to share with you guys.
So we're gonna make this quick, but essentially we are going to be mixing up some things as far as the memberships go, which if you guys don't know, that's the join button down below. You can pay a small fee, get some small perks, but this is the changes that are happening.
Yeah, so a couple months ago, we started testing out different tiers and different ways to offer you different types of memberships.
So essentially, after running memberships for a little while, we just want to simplify things because we're all about simplicity here. So essentially, we're going to be removing the two top tiers and only have one tier, which is the $1.99 tier, which means that it's great because it's the cheapest one, and we still are loading it with lots of perks.
So this new $1.99 tier is now going to be called the Rose Drivers, and things you get access to are discounts on merch, free access to all of our templates. You get to suggest DIYs that we can make, especially for this series, DIYing your DMs, you get first pick, special access to events and promotions going on, and you get to vote and shape the way we do our channel through the community tab.
So if you guys happen to be a Rose or a Bud, which are our top two tiers, those are gonna be canceled. So if you wanna become a Rose Driver, the new only tier, then you're just gonna have to go ahead and resubscribe, which we would appreciate. But anybody who's already a Seed, which is the new Rose Driver, I'm sorry it's so terminology. We're trying to simplify things. So this should be the last complicated thing that happens, but we're only gonna have that one tier. If you're already a Seed / now Rose Driver, then you're good to go.
I hope you get to enjoy some perks, and you can just think of this as a way to support one of your channels that you like watching anyways.
Yeah, and get some small little additions on the side.
Okay, let's get on to the DIYs.
Yes, we shall. So our first DIY comes from Trish, and she's a member, and she asks, I use a lot of oils and herbs for skincare and would love to see a DIY on how to best organize and display small bottles and jars. I love a witchy vibe. So do I. So our idea for this was to actually do something along the Apothecary style, because that's literally kind of what Apothecary is. Back in the day, they would have all their natural herbs and stuff in the drawers. So that's what we're gonna do. To do that, we're gonna do an IKEA hack. We love those. So from IKEA, we picked up 2 of these drawer units. This is the Mope unit. Don't know Swedish. And like I said, we have 2 of these, and we're gonna turn these into some shelves and drawer units. It's going to be a hanging unit. This can obviously be a table sitting unit if that's what you prefer. But our first step is to actually, well, first let's figure out the layout for this, because we're actually not gonna be using all of the drawers. Oh my God, tea. Okay. Oh my God, it is on the back already. I'm such an idiot. Okay. Definitely feel free to make your layout whatever you see fit, but what we're going with is 2 empty shelves at the top, 2 wider drawers in the middle, and then all of our small drawers at the very bottom. Now that we have our arrangement that we like, our next step is to actually take out all of the drawers, remember where you had them, and we're going to work on combining our 2 units together securely. I'm using these mini screws and drilling pilot holes in the front and the back of the shelf. Since I couldn't fit the drill in the shelf, I used an awl with a mini mallet and then screwed in the rest. It was honestly a struggle. So I'm staining using a gel stain. I'm just wiping it on and then wiping it off. Not unlike wax on, wax off. And I stained all inside the shelves as well, keeping in mind that my top 2 shelves are going to be exposed while the bottoms are gonna be covered by drawers. So I don't need to do those as well, but I need to do the top inside pretty well. And the key here is that the front of the drawers are actually going to be the back of the drawers, because we don't want that little loop-de-u at the top. So when you're staining, just keep in mind that you don't really need to stain the current front, because that's gonna be our new back. So we have our drawers, we have our unit, everything is Looking good. My next step is going to be adding hanging software to the back. You can use your hanging software of choice. There's lots of different hardware. What did I say? Software. Oh my God, am I okay? That's the second time I did that in this video.
Download the software to your shelf.
Next up, we're going to be adding the hanging hardware. You can use the hanging hardware of your choice. You can go to the Home Depots and just to look at their hardware section. They have like all these different hanging things. I don't know why, but it's kind of exciting. We're using kind of these like picture hanging ones, but we're attaching them with screws instead of nails for stability, and we're doing 2, top right, top left. The key to hanging any hardware on the back of this is to use a pilot hole because it's kind of made of this like compressed ply. You just want to make sure that the pieces aren't going to tear apart. So we pre-drilled pilot holes and then added our hardware. Then the very last step is the exciting step of adding on the label drawer pulls. I just got these off of Amazon. I will link them down below. And I'm just taking some small screws, again, drilling some pilot holes and adding those to the fronts of all of the drawers. So with some stain and these little drawer pulls, the whole thing came together really nicely. I think it is absolutely precious. Maybe that's the word? I don't know. That's the word I'm going with. It feels precious. Antique, but in a precious way. And all that's left to do is to style it. And since our viewer did mention that they wanted a witchy vibe, I added some labels that were on a black background with a gold paint pen and tried to use a kind of witchy font, complete with witchy symbols.
So this next DIY submission comes from Lindsay. She is also a member, so thank you for being a member. And this is what she writes. She likes this minimal/light art deco house number, and it's from Target. It's number tiles with a very cute number sign in front of them. And it's also $60 for 4 numbers and the holder and the number tile. And that seems like a lot. And I agree, that does seem like a lot, especially if your house number is a long one. It's gonna add up because you have to buy each tile individually. So I'm gonna attempt to recreate something like this, and hopefully it's gonna cost less than $60.
That costs how much?
True, truly Target. That costs how much? So the Target one is meant to be interchangeable, but since you're DIYing this anyways, you already know what your house number is and you can make it permanent. So that's what we're gonna be doing. So for our tiles, we're gonna use actual real Subway tiles from the hardware store. And the best thing is that individual tiles are like 30 cents from the hardware store. You can buy them on their own. So we have 4 of them. We're gonna do 1 number sign and then 3 that are the actual numbers. So since we're making this sign permanent, we're gonna be mounting the number tiles onto a piece of wood. So my first step is gonna be to cut out a back piece that fits all of the tiles. And the wood I'm using for this is 1/4-inch birch plywood. So next we need to make kind of the lip that goes around the tile numbers, and to do that I'm using this piece of 90-degree wood trim that you would use for trimming like walls, places in your house. This was only a couple dollars. It's really small and light. So I'm gonna be measuring out the size of my sign and cutting out 2 of these pieces to act as the trim on the top and the bottom. And while I was cutting out my wood, I also cut out these tiny little spacers that are the size of my hanging hardware because the screws for that are longer than the back wood of my sign, so I need little spacers that the screws can go through to hold everything in place. So my next step is going to be gluing the spacers onto the backboard and then painting all of my wooden pieces black with a super durable outdoor black paint. Okay, so once the wood is all painted black, it's time to assemble this, guys. So to assemble it, I'm gonna be using PL construction adhesive. It's just basically a really strong glue that holds a bunch of different materials together really well. So I'm putting some glue on the back of the tiles and sticking them on one at a time. And then for the trim on the top and the bottom, I'm putting some glue in the little groove and then sticking that on. I'm then gonna be using some clamps to hold this whole thing together while it dries. I'm also using a scrap piece of wood to lay over the tiles and putting the clamp on that so I can clamp all 4 pieces together even though I only have 2 clamps to do this. And then I clamped the trim as well, and I need to let that set until it's fully, completely dry. So once the glue was fully dry, I took it out of the clamps and then I just went over with the black paint And then I just went over with the black paint on any spots where I may have missed, like the sides of the tiles. And at this point, you can also screw your hanging hardware onto the back. I'm using these keyhole hangers. These things are great for when you want to mount something really flush to the wall, like this sign we want to mount flush to the front of the house. So now it's looking like this. I think it looks really great. It feels like a secure unit, which we love. So the very last step is just to add the house number on. So to do that, I'm gonna be using an electric cutter machine along with some outdoor weatherproof safe vinyl. If you don't wanna do that option, you could totally hand paint it on as well. Just make sure you use something like enamel paint that sticks to tile really well. Now for the numbers, you'll need to size them out to be the right size for the tiles. I've already gone ahead and pre-done that on a template that you can download on our website. This one's gonna be free. Not all of our templates are free, sometimes they're 99 cents, but if you are a member, you always get all of our templates for free, so check that out below. So with my electronic cutter machine, I just cut out all of the numbers and the actual number lettering. And then I was able to stick them on each one of my tiles. So this is how the completed sign turned out. I think this looks pretty identical to the original inspiration picture. And considering each one of these tiles was only 30 cents, I think this is a much more affordable option. All right, I hope this helps you out, Lindsay. Maybe you can make one for yourself. And thanks for being a member and sending in your DIY request.
So our last DIY idea comes from a non-member. This one slid into our DMs from Rochelle. She says, I need some DIY help. Actually, she just says, DIY help. My boyfriend is in a tiny bachelor apartment in Toronto with a body width entranceway. He needs somewhere for his shoes, and I was thinking of this image, but I have minimal woodworking skills. It needs to be freestanding since we can't drill into the walls. Okay, that's difficult because it's made out of wood, and I tried to rack my brain on how to build this with making it freestanding. Here's my little sketch. You honestly could if you added a giant base, but then you're like walking over the base. And I don't know about you guys, but the rules in Toronto are like you're allowed to drill into the walls, like kind of no matter what the landlord says. I think it's in the Landlord-Tenant Act. Don't quote me, but also I think you're good. You're allowed to paint, or you're allowed to like drill a normal amount of holes into the wall, you know? So I'm going to show you how to make this. It does require some tools, but it's going to be pretty easy. And when you're done, hopefully we'll have a shoot tree. So I picked up 3 pieces of 1x6 by, that's probably 8 feet tall since I'm this tall. I picked up 3 pieces of these. I think I'll need all 3 or just a little bit, 2 and a bit. So we're gonna start cutting and see where we get. We're gonna really go with the tree thing here because it's just a lot easier for me to explain. We're gonna start with the branches of the tree and then work on the trunk later. So what I'm gonna do is set my miter saw to a 20-degree angle so that way I can cut on an angle and my branches will therefore be on an angle. I'm going to be cutting 13-inch pieces from long edge to long edge. And I'm gonna be cutting out 10 of these in total. So while I was cutting, I realized that the best system is to actually cut off just a small portion of wood to get your first 20-degree cut, and then from there, measure your 13 inches. So I'm kind of doing like the short edge to the long edge, if that makes sense, if you're following me. So every time I make a cut, I just measure 13 inches again, make another cut, measure 13 inches. It's pretty simple, and it's going pretty quickly with my miter saw here. And then when I was done that, I just went off and ripped off a 4-foot piece of wood with a straight edge to be my trunk of my tree. So all in all, this actually only used 2 pieces of my 1x6 by 8 foot pieces of wood. If you're doing a different size shoe, if you have like a smaller shoe, maybe a little baby, you could do like a really tall, skinny tree. That'd be so cute. But you know what they say about shoe size? The bigger the shoe, the more wood you're gonna have to use. So I'm gonna return that 3rd piece of 1x6 by 8 piece of wood I got. And now we can start assembling, I guess. So before I move on, I'm creating actually a back piece because for this to freestand by itself, low-key, I just don't know how to do that because if these 2 pieces are in front of each other, there's not really a way to screw them in. Sorry, there's like an overhead camera that I am totally hitting right now. So my next step is going to be laying out this whole thing on the table, seeing how it looks to measure a back piece that I'm gonna make for this whole thing to be mounted onto. Once my MDF piece is cut out using my circle saw, I used a piece of wood to actually help me with this and make sure that my lines were super straight. I'm now moving on to actually tracing out all of my pieces onto that MDF. So I'm starting with my middle piece and I'm just making sure it's centered and tracing that out, and then I'm moving on to my side pieces. Now to do the side pieces, I started from the bottom and I measured 4 inches up, and then I brought in my protractor and marked out 20-degree angle, and then I lined up my branch piece with that and traced that out. I repeated this on the other side, and then I'm moving on to my next branch, which I'm leaving an 8 3/4 inch gap from the top of the lower branch to the bottom of the next branch. And again, doing my 20-degree angle and lining up my branch with that. I just repeated that again and again using my protractor for 20 degrees and my measuring tape to make sure that it's 8 inches 3/4 apart. I then went in with a pencil and then put little X's where I want to put some drill marks, because I'm going to actually be pre-drilling some holes so that when I go to attach these pieces, I can screw in from the back and I'll know exactly where to put my screws. Won't have to do any like guessing or measuring. So with those marks and with my holes pre-drilled in all the spaces, I can now attach my pieces. Honestly, this got a little bit tricky, but you just gotta stick it through because it actually gets easier as you start putting more branches on. Now to do this, I used some wood glue and some clamps, held the trunk into place, and then when it was in place, I pre-drilled from the back just to make sure that my screws wouldn't split the wood when I put them in. And then I went ahead and put in my screws. This can be a little bit easier if you use a friend, but essentially I'm wood gluing it, attaching it to the front, flipping it over, and from the back, pre-drilling and adding in my screws. I just repeated this until I have my whole tree done and attached. So now it's a solid unit, and actually guys, I had a little epiphany. It's kind of standing on its own because of the trunk. And if I were to do like a flat piece on the bottom, I think there's a very good chance of it just like standing on its own, and I know this was a concern for our viewer. So you could do that in the future if you didn't want to attach it to the wall. It's still like a little bit tall and a little bit heavy, so I think attaching it to the wall is a good idea, but it actually does stand on its own. So attaching to the wall, like you don't have to do a crazy amount. So next up, I'm just going to give it a quick sand so everything is smooth. Oddly enough, it wasn't totally smooth at the front, and that's because my wood planks were like different sizes, and those weren't my cut pieces. That was the Home Depot pieces. So I sanded it down to make sure it was even. I'm gonna go in with some wood filler and fill any cracks, and when that's dry, give it a quick sand. I'm then gonna go in with a black paint and paint the whole thing black. And just like that, it's done. I'm not even gonna pick it up because it's a little bit heavy, but it looks so good. This actually fully came together. I know it was kind of like MDF and wood, but at the end, it looks like something very sleek. So thank you for the suggestion, because I'm really into this shoot tree. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this week's episode.
And if this wasn't one of your DMs, maybe consider becoming a member, because we check those for DM suggestions and DIY suggestions first.
We also check Instagram as well. So if you're not following us on Instagram, you can also
DM us.
DM us there, follow us there, and subscribe to the channel if you're liking what you're seeing. Or if you don't like what you see, maybe we'll surprise you in the future.
All right, thanks so much for watching, guys.
We will see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.